Plans to bring the story of Peter Parker, a socially awkward teenage nerd who was bit by a radioactive spider and therefore gained superhuman powers, you know, that old cliche, to the big screen actually began way back in the 1980s when most of us weren't even a sparkle in our dad's eyes.
That's amazing.
Roger Corman was the first to give it a go with Orion Pictures, with Marvel co-creator Stan Lee even joining to help write the script. The original story was going to involve the Cold War and with Dr. Octopus as the main villain. However, budget issues between Corman and Lee delayed things, and the rights soon fell out of Corman's hands and into those of Menahem Golan and Yoram Globus's of the Cannon Group in 1985. However, they had never read a comic book in their lives and had no idea who or what Spider-Man actually was, believing that he was similar to a werewolf.
What are you talking about?
Based on this weird spider-werewolf hybrid man idea, Leslie Stevens was hired to write the script. The story was going to have Peter as an ID badge photographer who becomes the subject of a mad scientist's experiment which transforms him into a human spider. Kinda like The Fly, but stupid.
Insanity.
Tobe Hooper was about to shoot the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and Invaders from Mars for the same studio, so he also signed on to direct this one as well, as it seemed they were trying to turn Spider-Man into a horror movie.
Why wasn't I told?
However, once Stan Lee, apparently the only sober one around at the time, saw what they were playing at, he put an end to it and demanded a brand new script be written. At this point, Ted Newsom and John Brancato wrote a brand new draft, in which Peter gains his new abilities from a cyclotron experiment. Dr. Octopus was then going to be his mentor who turns evil. Barney Cohen was brought in to add more humour to the script, as well as a secondary villain. Joseph Zito was then hired to direct with the new story, and John Cusack was the first choice for the part of Peter at Stan Lee's request, as he felt he would be perfect. Maybe it's just me, but if this were made in the 80s, I always felt like Michael J. Fox would have been the perfect Peter Parker. However, the studio wanted Tom Cruise, and the director wanted stuntman Scott Lever, as he had made some promotional appearances as Spider-Man in the past. Bob Hoskins was considered for the role of Dr. Octopus, and Lauren Bacall and Katharine Hepburn for Aunt May, while Stan Lee himself wanted to play J. Jonah Jameson. Originally, it was called Spider-Man the Movie and was given the budget of somewhere between $15 and $20 million. However, Superman 4 The Quest for Peace then came out in 1987 and practically killed comic book movies for a good decade, that doesn't count, which made the studio lose faith in the whole project and slashed the budget down to $7 million. This angered Joseph Zito, who then left the project and was replaced by Albert Pune. However, Cannon was then taken over by Pathé's production company and this project was cancelled. Menahem Golan had already left the company, but was now working with 21st Century Film Corporation, and in 1989 he wanted to bring the project back. He actually sold all television, home video and theatrical rights in order to gain the money to fund the movie. At this point, Terminator and Aliens director James Cameron had previously met with Stan Lee in regards to possibly making an X-Men movie together, leading to Cameron signing on to write and direct Spider-Man. He finished up a treatment by 1993 for Kuroko Pictures, but this was much darker and more mature than the version we would actually end up seeing. It would have involved Spider-Man's origin story, the villains of Sandman and Electro, the latter of which was going to be a megalomaniacal businessman named Colton.
Shut up!
And the script contained a whole lot of foul language and even involved a sex scene between Spider-Man and Mary Jane on top of the Brooklyn Bridge. Hot?
What?
Cameron originally wanted Edward Furlong as Peter Parker, but once making Titanic, he changed his mind and decided that Leonardo DiCaprio was the man for the job, with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Dr. Octopus, and he also wanted Charlie Sheen involved as well. And allegedly, Michael Jackson also showed interest in playing the lead. Any excuse to have sticky hands in a kids film, I guess.
I don't remember.
However, the project was delayed once again when Golan actually sued the studio for trying to go ahead with the film without his involvement. Cameron had just finished True Lies for 20th Century Fox, which is part of a production deal, and they attempted to get the rights for Spider-Man as well, but they failed. Due to the constant production issues, Cameron decided that enough was enough, and he left the project to make 17 unnecessary Avatar films instead.
I'm sorry.
Studios fought over the rights for years, and then came along Batman and Robin is shit all over superhero movies all over again, and once more everyone lost interest in the Spider-Man project. Studios just didn't take superhero movies seriously anymore, and believed that comic books were just for kids. But thankfully, a little movie called Blade came along in 1998, as well as X-Men not long after, which finally gave studios the hope they needed. Marvel did manage to get the rights back, but then they sold them to Sony for $7 million, and they refused to go ahead using James Cameron's script. Possible directors included Roland Emmerich, Tony Scott, Barry Sonnenfeld, Michael Bay, Ang Lee, Jan de Bont, and M. Night Shyamalan, where Peter would have turned out to be half crab or some shit. None of these were interested in the project whatsoever. David Fincher was approached, but he wanted to develop the film based on Gwen Stacy's death, and the studio refused. Chris Columbus was then approached, but he turned it down to take on Harry Potter instead, and then they considered Tim Burton, who'd probably make Spider-Man look like this.
I don't know.
But Burton refused to do it due to his loyalty to DC. Steven Spielberg was then approached, but he turned it down, saying that he was a massive Spider-Man fan, but he would want to make a movie that was more important than the movie. What?
You sure you want to know?
And eventually they found the guy. Evil Dead director Sam Raimi, who signed on in January of 2000. He had been a massive fan of the Spider-Man comics since he was a kid. David Koepp wrote a brand new script, but he did admit that he took inspiration from Cameron's screenplay. It was Koepp who suggested spending the first half of the film on the origin story, making the audience wait to see Spider-Man, and to have Peter and Mary Jane not actually get together at the end, as, in a weird way, that would actually be more romantic. However, he took out Electro and Sandman and replaced them with the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus. However, Raimi actually found the father-son dynamic between Harry and Norman Osborn far more interesting, so Octopus was dropped, as well as Raimi believing that they just had too many characters as it was.
Oh, that sucks.
By June, Scott Rosenberg was brought in for more rewrites, but one thing Cameron wrote was that Peter didn't shoot webs from his wrists directly, but rather had invented mechanical web shooters like in the comics. However, Raimi felt like this would stretch the audience's suspension of disbelief too far and changed it. He felt it would make more sense for Peter to genuinely have these powers than a teenager being able to manufacture such gadgets on his own. I always found it weird that the comics has him create web shooters, because he's already got all of these spider abilities, so why is it less realistic that he can also shoot webs from his wrist?
I think you're pretty funny, don't you, freak?
The original script also had Spider-Man defusing a hostage situation on a train, and another where he protects Maximilian Fargus from the Green Goblin. For the titular character, the studio wanted someone who wasn't especially tall or handsome like Christopher Reeve, but someone with a lot of heart and soul for the audience to relate to. They considered Freddie Prinze Jr., Chris O'Donnell, Jude Law, Chris Klein, fucking Frankie Muniz, Elijah Wood, Topher Grace, Scott Speedman, Jay Roden, James Franco, and Joe Manganiello. Josh Hartnett was actually offered the part, but he turned it down. And then Wes Bentley was asked, but he also declined, claiming he just wasn't interested in superhero movies. Heath Ledger was then offered the role, but he turned it down, claiming that he would be taking someone else's dream away. Alright, cocky.
I'm so sorry.
However, after seeing the Cider House Rules, Sam Raimi decided that he needed Tobey Maguire. He didn't fit the regular look of a superhero at the time, so he was perfect. Though Maguire admitted he had never read a Spider-Man comic book in his life, and he only agreed because he quite liked the script.
Yes, sir.
He was trained by a physical trainer, a yoga instructor, a martial arts expert, and a climbing expert, spending months getting into shape. He also studied spiders closely and worked with a wireman in order to accurately depict their climbing motion as closely as possible. He also had to go on a specific diet due to the fitness required, which was extremely difficult to do as the poor fella is actually vegan. In fact, when Peter shows off his manly physique, that's Tobey's actual body. But in an earlier scene, that's a body double with Tobey's head edited on because man got hench. And have a subtle dick joke.
Yeah. Big change.
When casting the Green Goblin, considerations included Nicolas Cage, Jason Isaacs, Bill Paxton, Mel Gibson, John Travolta, Brad Dourif, Robert De Niro, and John Malkovich, but they all turned it down. Billy Crudup was signed on and even quit other productions to star in this. But after all of that, it was concluded that he was far too young and was then let go. Bit douchey. Though other reports claim that he actually dropped out of the project due to scheduling conflicts, so just decides which story you want to believe.
I understand.
In November of 2000, Willem Dafoe signed on for the project, and he always insisted on doing all of his own stunts in the heavy and awkward costume, believing that a stuntman just wouldn't be able to accurately convey the character's body language. The costume involved 580 pieces and took half an hour just to put on. God help him if he ever needed a piss.
Weird.
Kate Bosworth tried out for the part of Mary Jane but didn't get it, as did Elizabeth Banks, who was told that she was too old. It was then offered to Kate Hudson, but she turned it down, and other considerations involved Eliza Dushku, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Ali Sheedy, Jodie Foster, Tinky Winky, Natasha Richardson, Phoebe Cates, Tatum O'Neal, Bridget Fonda, A Chair, Laurie Loughlin, Diane Lane, Sarah Jessica Parker, Brooke Shields, Kyra Sedgwick, Justine Bateman, Nicole Kidman, Julia Roberts, Hedwig the Owl, Maury Ringwald, Jennifer Aniston, Uma Thurman, Jennifer Connelly, Winona Ryder, Christina Applegate, Cameron Diaz, Alyssa Milano, Gandalf Staff, Tori Spelling, Nev Campbell, Tiffany Thiessen, Alison Hannigan, The Virgin Mary, Drew Barrymore, Mina Savari, Tara Reid, and Jamie King. Sam Raimi actually wanted Alicia Witt, but after finding out Tobey Maguire was cast as the lead, Kirsten Dunst was determined to get the role, believing it would give the movie more of an independent feel. She auditioned and quickly got the part.
Yeah.
When deciding who should play J. Jonah Jameson, they considered R. Lee Ermey, Hugh Laurie, Harve Presnell, Dennis Farina, Christopher Lloyd, Michael Keaton, Fred Ward, and Bill Paxton. J.K. Simmons landed the role, but the funny thing is, he wasn't even told by his agent. He had bumped into a Spider-Man fan in public who told him that he was cast. He had read it on a fan website 3 hours before Simmons' agent decided to call him to inform him of the great news. Stan Lee had had his heart set on playing the role for years, but the studio felt like he was too old, and Stan relented, and later claimed that he did a better job than he would have ever been able to do.
A vigilante, a public menace. What's he doing on my front page?
Mr. Jameson, your wife is on line 1. She needs to know if you...
Mr. Jameson, is a page 6 problem.
We have a page 1 problem. Shut up. Crap, mega crap. I'll give you $200 for all of them.
He pulled 6 people off that subway car.
Sure, from a wreck he probably caused. Something goes wrong and this creepy crawler is there. Look at that. He's fleeing the scene. What's that tell you? Call the patent office, copyright the name Green Goblin. I want a corner every time somebody says it.
He's a hero!
Then why does he wear a mask?
Spider-Man wasn't attacking the city. He was trying to save it. That's slander.
It is not. I resent that. Slander is spoken. In print, it's libel. If we can get a picture of Julia Roberts in a thong, we can certainly get a picture of this weirdo.
You don't trust anybody. That's your problem.
I trust my barber.
Seriously, can we all agree that J.K. Simmons just steals the show anytime he's on camera? And hey, they got Bruce Campbell in the movie, that's nice. Hugh Jackman claimed that he was actually supposed to appear as Wolverine in the movie as a joke or a quick cameo, but when he arrived in New York to shoot, they weren't able to film it as they couldn't get a hold of a costume in time.
What makes you think I would want to know that?
Filming began on January the 8th, 2001, but after the devastating 9/11 attacks later that same year, some scenes had to be reshot, and images of the Twin Towers were digitally erased from some of the movie's scenes and promotional posters. Sadly, on March the 6th, 45-year-old construction worker Tim Holcomb was killed by a forklift on set, and Sony was sued for $58,805 for not taking the correct safety measures. It would only continue in April when 4 of the Spider-Man costumes were stolen and weren't recovered for another 18 months when the culprits were finally arrested. Though Macho Man Randy Savage did all of his own stunts and ended up injuring himself, so this movie was a disaster to make.
Of course it was.
So after decades of delays, a million directors, countless scripts, disasters on set and bickering studios, Spider-Man was finally released on May the 3rd, 2002, and needless to say, it shocked the world, becoming the first ever movie to pass the $100 million mark in a single weekend. And it was the highest grossing superhero film of all time on its release, grossing $825 million worldwide. Fans and critics loved it, finding it a fun, heartfelt comic book adaptation. And this came around the time they were finally beginning to become accepted again in Hollywood. It was the right movie at the right time. It's just a lot of fun. The opening credits take about 7 months to end, but they look so cool, who really cares? But how the hell does Peter keep up with his bus for so long? This is even before he gets his powers. Tobey Maguire is fine for most of the movie. It just takes him a while to properly get into it.
I read all your research on nanotechnology. Really brilliant. I don't want to fight you, Flash.
He does get better throughout the film, but there are points when there's just no emotion there. The character itself is pretty relatable for most. He's in love with a girl who barely knows he exists because she's of course dating an asshole, and apparently has a best friend who enjoys stealing his girl. But somehow James Franco makes it funny and you're not really that pissed at him for doing it. I want to root for this character and I do feel bad for him, but the writing makes it very difficult sometimes. I mean, he asks for Mary Jane's photo, and can we just all agree, by the way, that Kirsten Dunst is fucking adorable? But how many pictures does he need? This isn't for the school paper, this is for his own personal wank bank. Peter is so creepy in this one. He saves MJ and catches all of this, which wasn't CGI, by the way. Toby actually did this and it took over 100 takes, which is why Dunst looks so surprised. But throughout the whole film, he barely even talks to her. He just stares and smiles like a creepy serial killer.
You just get contacts?
I cried like a baby when you played Cinderella.
Peter, that was first grade.
It just makes me really uncomfortable, which is a huge problem with this film. It's very difficult to root for anyone in this movie. On the surface, Peter is a pretty decent, albeit slightly creepy guy, who even gains a fucking athlete's physique and still doesn't have the confidence to talk to her. But then his best friend ends up dating his girl. This is about 73 violations of the bro code if we ever did see one. And Harry's reasoning?
It's just, you never made a move.
Fuck you prick! He doesn't even tell Peter either. He finds out from Mary Jane, and then when confronted, he tries to lie and hide it. And she also knows that Peter loves her, so she's also a dickhead. Just not as big of a dickhead as Harry.
He's loved her since the 4th grade. He pretends like he doesn't, but...
Does he? Everyone in the tri-state area knows that he loves her. Now, this would work if the movie portrayed Harry as Flash, the douchebag who doesn't treat her right. I mean, it does, but only about an hour in. Throughout the film, we see Harry as his best friend and they're quite close. He is quite likable and not a tosser. But then randomly, he tries to control what Mary Jane wears.
Why didn't you wear the black dress?
And then defends his father when he insults his girlfriend.
So just keep your mouth shut about stuff you don't understand.
By the way, Tobey Maguire and James Franco ironically did actually have tension on set because they both had a crush on Kirsten Dunst, so imitating life, I guess.
That's impossible.
But I can't root for her either because instead of exiting the relationship, which she later does, so don't tell me that she's too scared to do it. Seriously, she leaves the relationship and he doesn't even object. But she cheats on him! She cheats on Harry with Spider-Man in a scene that was apparently hell to shoot because Toby's nose kept filling up with water and he couldn't breathe. I'm more annoyed that she doesn't recognize the voice of the guy she's lived next door to for her entire life. He doesn't even try to hide it.
You know who I am.
I do?
But she never learns from this. She never confronts Harry to tell her that she made a mistake and cheated. Peter never owns up to it. It is never acknowledged again. She just cheats and it's all wine and roses. But it turns out that MJ is basically just Lois Lane because she only loves Spider-Man and not Peter Parker.
Would I know his name? This guy?
You'll think I'm a stupid little girl with a crush.
Even though the movie randomly decides to end with her saying, by the way, I've loved you all along.
There was only one person who I was thinking of, and it wasn't who I thought it'd be. It was you, Pete.
Although I hate the cliche of building to a romance that doesn't romance, it is quite sweet here and makes sense as he decides he can't be with her for her own protection, putting her in the friend zone. Ha, how'd you like it, bitch? And then she somehow recognizes his lips but not his voice.
What's that all about?
The writing is very strong. There's no massive origin needed, really. In the first 15 minutes, we already learn almost everything we need to know about Peter and his life. The spider sense is pretty awesome, and it's a great scene when he owns Flash. But surely, once Spider-Man went public, wouldn't everyone who witnessed this fight put 2 and 2 together and realize his identity? Just like when he enters the wrestling competition, wouldn't everyone remember the guy who dressed as a spider and had these powers? Now, I know they don't take his name or any information from him, but they don't remember his face? There's no cameras anywhere?
Peter? What's going on in there?
I'm having a wank. Go away, Aunt May. Even when Peter last talks to Uncle Ben, he just comes across as a complete arsehole, and it doesn't match up with any of his previous scenes. I get that he's struggling to come to terms with the fact that he's becoming an arachnid, but this is just out of nowhere. And then he goes on to offend a bunch of snowflakes everywhere.
That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you?
Seriously, that was cut out of many versions of the film, but it's such a timid joke. That offended people?
Don't be a coward.
Although, shouldn't the spider sense be telling him when he's about to get hit by a chair? He also gets conned out of the prize money, but this doesn't make any sense either.
It said $3,000 for 3 minutes, and you pinned him in 2.
But he didn't pin him. He knocked him out. The referee stopped the match, not him. This is some bullshit.
Really?
Then the cop has a go at Peter for not risking his life to stop a man with a gun. What kind of cop is this? The Uncle Ben scene is really sad considering all of the circumstances. The responsibility speech, the last time they spoke he yelled at him, he let the killer go, he turns into vengeance, and it is really emotional. Of course, we have the regular superhero film tropes like the crazy man turning evil because of a science experiment going wrong, the villain asking the hero to join the dark side, the villain making the hero decide between two things because they obviously can't do both at the same time, even though they always end up doing both at the same time. The angry mob ganging up on the bad guy dying without the hero actually being a murderer, which they even used twice in the same film! The effects for the most part look great, but sometimes they shift into PlayStation 2 graphics mode. And then Toby improvises and tries to get Marvel a lawsuit.
Up and away, Web! Shazam!
Norman Osborn is so dark and I love it.
It's not the first time I've been proven wrong.
I was told Speed 2 would be a good idea, but I do find it convenient that anytime some weirdo gains superpowers and runs around in spandex, there's another evil weirdo in the exact same city doing the exact same thing. Apparently he somehow murders one of Norman's employees, but they don't have any CCTV anywhere. This kid just stands here, deserves to die, the little idiot. The schizophrenia is handled really well. The split personality is brilliant. Willem Dafoe nails both sides of the conversation perfectly and shifts between the two seamlessly. It's an amazing portrayal of Jekyll and Hyde. It's a great spectacle though as they fight in a burning building. He has a lot of very subtle moments, like when Aunt May slaps his hand away from some food and he gets angry but she doesn't realise. He then clocks who Peter really is while the hero is oblivious, and it's an epic moment. He's so good that even when on paper the line is quite silly, Willem Dafoe somehow makes it creepy, dark, and really menacing.
Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout.
He's so good that even when he's trying to trick Peter, you can't tell when he's genuinely himself or when he's the Goblin. It's an incredible performance.
Who's the photographer who takes the pictures of Spider-Man?
I mean, the paper clearly publishes Peter's name. Maybe give it a read, mate. Speaking of which, some dialogue is pretty bad.
Are you in or are you out?
It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind.
You grabbed me and said, Aunt May? Aunt May? Is that an angel?
Don't do it, Goblin!
Yeah, that'll work.
He's not gonna make it! He's gonna make it!
Ah, they're discussing Spider-Man 4. The movie is pretty good. I know, I have issues with a lot of the characters' motivations, and some of the story doesn't really make sense, but it's a film about a radioactive spider giving a teenager superpowers. When was it ever going to make sense? It's a lot of fun with a great villain, a sometimes questionable, but overall mostly likeable hero, kind of, little bit. In my mind, Spider-Man is a pretty good beginning to the character's run in Hollywood. Norman Bates. I'll put Norman Bates. I'll put Norman Bates in Spider-Man.